The first day of World War II was fading away. That Sunday morning, on September 3, 1939, Britain had declared war on Germany, officially starting the armed conflict. However, an order was issued that under no circumstances should the German U-boat fleet harm any civilian passenger ships. Oberleutenant Fritz-Julius Lemp, commanding U-30, was told to only open fire against ships that posed a threat to his ship and crew, and that fateful evening, he spotted one. While on his first patrol, barely 12 hours into the war, Lemp saw a blacked-out silhouette zigzagging off the Irish coast. The mysterious ship was way off regular civilian routes, prompting the commander to believe she was an armed enemy vessel. Shortly before 8 p.m., the skipper ordered his crew to open fire, and U-30 launched the first 2 torpedoes of the war. However, the second one malfunctioned and suddenly turned toward them. The commander immediately ordered the crew to dive deeper than the projectile's path, and once out of danger, they emerged to the surface, only to realize the irreversible mistake they had made. Illusions of Grandeur. SS Athenia was launched in January of 1922 and completed in 1923 by the Fairfield Shipbuilding and Engineering Company of Govan in Glasgow. She was built in a joint venture for the Anchor-Donaldson Line. At 526.3 feet long, 66.4 feet wide, and 38.1 feet deep, she was the largest ship in the line's numerous fleets, alongside her sister, Letitia. The imposing ocean liner measured 13,465 gross register tons and 8,118 net register tons in weight. She also had 6 steam turbines driving twin screws via double reduction gearing, which allowed her to reach a top speed of 15 knots. Inside, Athenia had a capacity for 516 cabin passengers and 1,000 in third class, as she was designed to provide people who could not afford first-class accommodations with a comfortable option to cross the ocean. Furthermore, she was equipped with several dining and sitting rooms, as well as bars, libraries, and even smoking rooms that added to the make-believe luxury often associated with transatlantic passenger liners. She also had some spaces converted to fit additional passengers in trying times. But perhaps more importantly, Athenia had a reputation as a family ship, maintaining an image as an easygoing vessel since the 1920s. Together with her sister, the ships worked the transatlantic route, linking Liverpool and Glasgow with Quebec and Montreal during the summer season and to Halifax in the winter. But in 1928, the Pier 21 immigration complex was built in Halifax, calling the liner more frequently. Eventually, Athenia would cover over 100 trips to Halifax while conveying immigrants. A decade later, however, the traveling conditions would become grimmer than ever. In the post-Titanic era, the transatlantic liner was fitted with improved life-saving equipment, including jackets and boats. Still, no civilian ship could be prepared for what World War II would bring. A cursed name. Leading up to Athenia's sailing on September 1, 1939, the headlines predicted an inescapable war, and ultimatums were issued between countries that escalated local preparations for a global clash. Upon leaving the final stop at Liverpool, Captain James Cook addressed the Admiralty building. Concerned, he asked for guidance regarding updates for sailing instructions in case the war erupted. The captain was then given a diversion 30 miles further north than originally planned, and was informed Germany had just invaded Poland. Despite the unavoidable signs of war, Athenia departed Liverpool at 1 p.m. on September 2nd, without recall. She was carrying 500 Jewish refugees, 469 Canadians, 311 American citizens, and 72 UK subjects. Additionally, she had a crew of 315, and all in all, 3/4 of the people on board were women and children. For 2 days, it was business as usual, except for blackout regulations imposed by the captain at night. By the evening of the 3rd, Athenia was 60 nautical miles south of Rockall and 200 nautical miles northwest of Innistrahul in Ireland. Ironically, she was almost at the exact location where the first Athenia ship of the Donaldson Line was sunk by a German submarine in August of 1917, losing 15 people and 440 horses. Fatefully, the liner was named after the original Athenia to pay her tribute. Following the tragic events of that September night, the line would never use that name again. Collateral damage. It was around 4:30 p.m. when Oberleutenant Fritz-Julius Lemp spotted a darkened ship steering a zigzag course. Her erratic motion and the fact that she seemed to be well off the normal shipping routes suggested the vessel could either be a troop ship, a Q ship, or an armed merchant ship. Moreover, the suspicious ship was running without lights. The skipper ordered the crew of U-30 to track the potentially dangerous enemy vessel. As such, they followed their prey for 3 hours. Before noon that Sunday, Britain had declared war on Germany. However, German vessels were strictly forbidden to attack civilian ships, and Lemp was aware of the consequences. Meanwhile, Captain Cook had joined his passengers for dinner that evening, feeling safe deep enough into the Atlantic Ocean, northwest of Ireland. As the second dinner sitting was being served at about 7:40 p.m., a sudden explosion rocked Athenia on the port side near the engine room. The dining room was plunged into darkness as tables and chairs skidded across the deck. The German commander had fired 2 torpedoes at the liner. They hit true, and she began to settle by the stern. The detonation caused the engine room to flood, and several cabins were smashed. A blast of steel and smoke filled the scene. The surviving passengers and crew reacted to the disaster quickly. In a matter of minutes, the crew closed the watertight doors, and the passengers rushed to their lifeboat stations, as they had rehearsed. But this was no drill. State of emergency. Young Donald Wilcox of Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, had made his way to the peak of the ship. He was at the bow, watching the waves curl away, when the ship rose up several feet and fell back down abruptly. Fortunately, he wasn't thrown off his feet. People groped in the dark, as crew members guided them with matches and flashlights to what remained of the staircase before the emergency lights came on. All 26 lifeboats were filled and launched. Meanwhile, the distress signals reached ships reasonably close by, while Oberlieutenant Lemp kept quiet and quickly left the scene. It wasn't until past midnight that a Swedish steam yacht, Southern Cross, and a Norwegian freighter, MS Knut Nelson, arrived at the site. Later on, 3 Royal Navy destroyers reached the sinking ship. HMS Electra, HMS Escort, and HMS Fame picked up survivors and provided food and dry clothing. The next morning, an American freighter, SS City of Flint, took the survivors from the European ships and got them safely across the Atlantic to Halifax, as Knut Nelson returned other stowaways back to Ireland, and the destroyers sailed to Scotland. It wasn't yet noon on Monday when Athenia heeled over and sank stern first. Miraculously, 1,306 people survived. After the shock had passed, and the survivors were generously assisted at both sides of the Atlantic, word quickly spread through the English-speaking world. A civilian passenger ship had been attacked mere hours after the declaration of war, making headlines across all major newspapers in Canada, the US, and the United Kingdom. And evidently, the Germans were to be blamed. A tight spot. When the German High Command learned of the incident, they denied any implication. In fact, when Grand Admiral Erich Johann Albert Raeder first heard of the tragedy, he inquired deeply into the matter and was assured none of his U-boats were nearer than 75 miles to the location of the shipwreck. Therefore, he told the US diplomats in good faith that the German Navy was not responsible. However, when Lemp made it back to Germany, he confessed to his crime and reported the incident to Raeder, who in turn reported it to Adolf Hitler in person. Even so, they decided not to court-martial the commander, for he had made an understandable decision, albeit an unfortunate one. Consequently, the U-30's log was altered to sustain the official denials. Within a month, the Nazi Party's official newspaper published an article twisting the facts and claiming that Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, had attempted to turn neutral public opinion against Germany. Some theories alleged the UK was even trying to pull the United States into the war, as there were several Americans aboard Athenia. But it would take years to prove the conspiracy theories were unfounded. At last, during the Nuremberg trials, the truth came out. In January of 1946, Admiral Karl Dönitz admitted the liner had been accidentally torpedoed by U-30. Though he stated the skipper had truly mistaken Athenia for a merchant cruiser, he also confessed the German military had made every effort to conceal the truth, weaving an elaborate cover-up and swearing the crew to secrecy. Public opinion had been right from the start. It had been a German U-boat that sank Athenia, which became the first Allied ship sunk in World War II. Soon, the Allied governments were pushed into action. As the Canadian Member of Parliament for Broadview in Toronto, Thomas L. Church argued, quote, "I say we owe a duty to those passengers tonight." Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to Dark Seas and the rest of our Dark Documentaries channels, and make sure to leave us a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And for many more adventures at sea, don't hesitate to activate the notifications by clicking on the bell icon. Stay tuned.